Here.
Dylan here. Tomorrow.
Here.
Here, present.
Alright. Next up, items for consideration of a zoning request for property located at 701 Montgomery Street, Rockingham County Tax Parcel 156.
We also approval on that.
Approval for, is there a motion to approve the November 15th planning board minutes?
I'll motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor? Say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Now, the first thing for consideration is rezoning request for property located at 701 Montgomery Street, Rockingham County Tax Parcel number 150268 from neighborhood business to residential R6. Jason.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair and members of the board, Trent Balbo is petitioning to rezone a property located at 701 Montgomery Street, Rockingham County Tax Parcel number 150268 from neighborhood business NB to residential 6 R6. Docket number Z 2023-02. The parcel encompasses an area of 7,840.8 square feet or 0.18 acres. A vacant two-story commercial building constructed in 1917 for the tax record is located on the lot. Residential dwellings are allowed in the neighborhood business district, but only as an accessory to a commercial use with a special use permit, meaning that the residential has to be a secondary accessory use to an existing commercial use. There has to be a business with a secondary use as residential, if that makes sense. The surrounding land use is a mixture of neighborhood business, residential 6, and the areas to the south and east are also zoned residential 6. To the north and west, the abutting lots are zoned neighborhood business and residential 6. Overall, the area is primarily residential with a few commercial properties adjacent to the existing property. Considering the presence of an abutting residential 6 neighborhood to the south and consistency with the surrounding land use, a zoning designation of R6 for the property would be consistent with the surrounding area. The property is located in Growth Management Area 2, urban, which encompasses the area immediately outside of the Central Business District. And Growth Management Area 2 prioritizes expansion of housing stock alternatives, rehabilitation of existing housing stock, and preservation of significant historic structures. Therefore, we find the proposed zoning is consistent with the 2022 Reidsville Land Development Plan, and the planning staff recommend that the proposed rezoning be approved based on consistency with our adopted plan. Planning staff recommend the proposed rezoning application be approved. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I'll make a motion to recommend the proposed rezoning be approved for the specified parcels to the request zoning district based upon consistency and reasonableness determination. Statements that are included in the board's agenda packet submitted during the rezoning presentation and may be amended, incorporated into the motion to be included in the minutes.
There was not a public hearing held on, but.
Is anyone here to speak on that?
There's a motion on the board. Can you rescind that motion?
I rescind the motion.
You have the public hearing.
Yes. Is there anyone here to speak on this case? Here tonight? Close of the
Public hearing and then discussion.
public hearing is now closed. Is there any discussion in the board?
I'll make a motion to recommend the proposed rezoning be approved for the specified parcels to the requested zoning district based upon the consistency and reasonableness determination statements that are included in the board agenda packet submitted during the rezoning presentation, and as many as may be recommended incorporated into the motion to be included in the minutes.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor, please, signify by raising your right hand. Say aye. Motion has been approved. We now move to second item for consideration of a special use permit request to place a manufactured home on vacant property located on Hill Street, Rockingham County Tax Parcel number 154106. Just so everyone knows, this is a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing per North Carolina General Statute 160D 406 and 705 that sets forth the standards for granting a special use permit as follows. The board's discretion is limited. The board must base its decision upon competent, relevant, and substantial evidence on the record. The quasi-judicial decision is not a popularity contest. It is a decision constrained by the standards and the ordinances and based on the facts presented. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. Participation is limited. This meeting is open to the public. Everyone is welcome to watch. Parties with standing have rights to participate fully. Parties may present non-repetitive evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Parties are limited to the applicant, the local government, and individuals who can show they will suffer special damages. Other individuals may serve as witnesses when called by the board. General witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, the board needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impact on property values and projections about impacts of increased traffic. Individuals providing expert opinion must be qualified as experts and provide the factual evidence upon which they base their expert opinion. Witnesses must swear or affirm their testimony. At this time, we will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide testimony.
So if you intend to speak on behalf of the special use permit, you can come forward now and we'll administer your oath.
Thank you.
All right, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Say aye.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Michael C. Rodriguez has applied for a special use permit for a vacant property located on Hill Street, Rockingham County Tax Parcel number 154106. The applicant is requesting approval to place a manufactured home at this location. The property is zoned residential 6 R6, and manufactured homes are allowed with a special use permit in R6. Michael C. Rodriguez is the applicant and the property owner. The standards in the ordinance for manufactured homes on single lots are as follows. Manufactured homes on single lots must be built to HUD standards, the National Mobile Home Construction and Safety Standards Act. Each unit must have been constructed within 5 years of the date of issuance of the certificate of zoning compliance and must have a seal of compliance per General Statute 143-144. Each unit must further comply with the following criteria. The manufactured home has a length not exceeding 4 times its width, and the pitch of the manufactured home's roof has a minimum vertical rise of 2 2/10 feet for each 12 feet of horizontal run, 2.12 inches in 12 feet. And the roof is finished with shingles. The exterior siding consists predominantly of vinyl or aluminum, horizontal lap siding, wood, or hardboard. A continuous permanent masonry curtain or foundation unpierced except for ventilation and access is installed under the manufactured home. The tongue axle, removable towing apparatus, and transporting lights are removed after final placement on the site. A porch at least 16 square feet in size and at least 4 feet by 4 feet in dimensions with stairs must be attached to the front entrance of the home in a workmanship manner that meets North Carolina State Building Code. The applicant is required to meet this criteria in addition to any conditions placed on the special use permit. As you're aware, the board must come to certain findings regarding the impact of the development on the area. It is the applicant's responsibility to provide evidence and materials that will allow the board to take the appropriate action. The board may also recommend conditions on the application to ensure that the proposed project meets the intent of the zoning ordinance. The following are the specific findings of fact from the zoning ordinance in which the board must find. The use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located where proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted and approved. The use meets all required conditions and specifications. The use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity. The location and the character of the use, if developed according to the plan as submitted and approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located in general conformity with the land development plan for Reidsville and its surroundings. The planning staff recommend the following conditions be placed on the special use permit. They are in line with the request. The use shall comply with the special use criteria for manufactured/mobile homes per the Reidsville zoning ordinance, and the unit shall comply with the North Carolina State Building Code. And that is all I have, and I will be glad to answer any questions that I can.
Are there any manufactured homes on this street?
I'm not entirely sure. That would require further investigation.
Appearance-wise, it is consistent with the. Is that what you said?
The appearance of the
Yeah, that.
of the home itself.
I mean, the home as shown on here
Mhm.
is consistent with what's in the area.
I really wouldn't be able to make a recommendation on this since it's evidence-based, so there's not really a staff recommendation on it. I can't really sway you one way or the other on it since it's evidence-based.
Look as good as it.
Good evening. My name is Michael Rodriguez, and first I want to thank you all for the opportunity, and Drew and the whole team of inspectors that you have in this city. I'm from Miami, and I fall in love with Reidsville, and I own myself a few properties here. Right across the street from this property that I would like to bring this manufactured home, I bought a property that was very on a very bad condition. And I brought professionals to the project, and I remodeled that entire home. The address is 314 Hill Street. I sold that property for almost $200,000. Property is beautiful. Since I own the lot across the street is the reason why I like to start this next project. Also, I own 305 South Harris Street, also on a very bad condition, and I made it beautiful. With that said, I just want you guys to know that my intention here is to make the community more beautiful. I don't intend to bring the worst to our neighborhood. Like I said, I love the city, I love the community, and I just wanted to improve. And with that said, I brought some information here I'd like to share with you guys. Pictures of before and the after, those projects that I have done, and also not only pictures of this project that I'd like to do now with this manufactured home, but also ideas of the future of that and what I'm going to do. I will apply for all the permit necessaries. I will follow the rules and regulations for the community and the city. If you guys allow me to do this project, I am very happy and excited about it, and I'd like to share this with you all. Thank you.
We will leave copies since this is being submitted as evidence. You mind leaving these copies?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they'll be submitted to the record. You can show it to them, we'll leave copies.
Okay, I'll give you that. Oh, thank you, Drew. Thank you, Jason. I'll give you one too. I really much. Thank you.
It sounded like violating
Thank you.
issue.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.
No, I think this, and so some of these pictures are from the property across the street, right?
Some of those pictures are proof of what I've done in the neighborhood, and also the actual manufactured home. And at the end of it, there's a picture of the porch and the front of it, and upgrades I will do regarding to some information that I got from Drew and the city, and updates that need to be done to this property. Thank you.
Looks like you did a good job.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any more questions? Is you heard this?
So you aren't gonna live in this home?
Yes, I'd love to.
You're gonna live in the manufactured home?
On this one,
Yes.
okay, so I'm in the middle of a little situation here. So I have a very beautiful home that I was supposed to be living on. It's right next to the school, the area. I love it, it's very peaceful. But there is a funeral home across the street. I didn't know that until I came to see the work. And I had another issue the other day. Every time there's the situation going on in the funeral, they keep blocking the driveway, and I don't even have space to park myself, so I have to go through the school to be able to get in the property. I came and I spoke to some of the inspector here. Actually, I don't know if I spoke to Drew or Tommy, and I mentioned that to him. But unfortunately, since I didn't get a general contract, that's what I did. I got a permit to do it as an owner. So now I will live in this property for 1 year. Why? Because I didn't got a general contractor to finish. And I will do this because I'm not allowed to rent this property or sell it into at least 1 year. I love the property, but I don't like the energy and the vibe. I see a lot of sad people coming into this funeral home every day. And the other day, a very nice lady was blocking my driveway, and I couldn't even get in the driveway. So I don't want to go to these people and ask them to move from my driveway. I know they lost a family member. So it's kind of like hard for me to kind of like even approach someone that is blocking my driveway in this situation. So with that said, I probably stay at this manufactured home. Why? Because we are living in there now, where it is. We live in Miami, but we are staying in this property now. And the idea is to make a real house with it, build a nice foundation for it, and I believe that we will stay there instead of our properties in 305 South Harris Street.
Is this the kind that comes in on 2 trucks and they put it together?
To be honest with you, I did a research on YouTube. I don't have a lot of information, but I did contact a company to do this movement, assembling, and installation of the property. I got some good information from Drew. I will need to get professional like electricians, plumbers to do all this correct things that needs to be done. And I'm ready for it, and I just can't wait. And I will, like I said, follow all the rules to make sure that this is going to be safe for the communities and my neighbors, and that it's good enough for me to live there with my beautiful lady. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Thank you, Drew, Jason.
This is a quasi-judicial hearing, we'll have to go through the 4 findings of fact. When I get done reading every one of them, it will just like sign right hand and approval of them, and then someone will walk through the motion again. Oh, I'm sorry. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, we will have to go through the 4 findings of fact, and I need everyone to like sign approval at the end of each one of them, and then someone to recommend a motion again, make a motion again. Okay. First one is the use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if located or proposed and developed according to the plan as submitted and approved. 2, the use meets all required conditions and specifications.
Agreed.
Number 3, the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining or abutting property, or that the use is a public necessity.
Agreed.
And number 4, the location and the character of the use, if developed according to the plan as submitted and approved, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the land development plan for Reidsville and its surroundings.
Agreed.
Great. Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
I move we accept the recommendation.
Do they have a good one?
No,
There's no staff recommendation.
there's a motion.
Since I motion to accept this.
Oh, no.
So there was already a motion on the floor from Joe, with Morris in their motion.
Yes.
Okay. A motion, Joe Town, and a second for Mark. All in favor?
Thank you.
Alright. Do I need to say that we are out of this?
Thank you so much. You won't regret this, I promise. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night. Thank you.
Good luck.
I need to get out of there. The next item on the agenda is video project REBOOT Reidsville.
Yeah, so I hope everyone got time to read over the code assessment that Chad and his staff have put together for us. I know I've poured through it extensively. I hope you can see the changes we're making are rather extensive. It's all intended to basically make the development code more user-friendly, more predictable, and incentivize good development. So that's some of the key things, and Chad's going to go way deeper into that when he gets up here and talks. So, is there any questions you have of me before I sit down? All right, thanks. I'll go Chad.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chad Meadows with CodeWright. Thank you so much for the chance to be here with you today. I'm going to take, I don't know, the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I'll try to make this as painless as possible. And overview the code assessment document with you. So we'll talk a little bit about, REBOOT Reidsville, this code assessment project, and kind of where we go from here. As always, if you have a question or want to make a comment, please, feel free to just put it right out there. No need to raise your hand or anything. I'm very interested in hearing any input questions that you guys have. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's 5 things we'll cover tonight. I'm going to talk very briefly about the project background, the goals, the tasks, the team. I'll give you the purpose and the contents of the code assessment. We'll talk a little bit about the recommendations. And then if there are questions that anybody has, that don't come up during discussion of recommendations, there's a slide for us to take a break and ask questions. And then I'll tell you where we go from here. Okay. And so with that, let's jump in. So Unified Development Ordinance is a joining together of the various regulations in disparate documents today. You've got a zoning ordinance, you've got a set of subdivision regulations, you've got a set of flood protection provisions, and there's a handful of other documents that city staff rely on for development review. And one of the things that we see in kind of modern trends and in best practice for development regulation is to bring all of those things together into a single document. That allows you to have a single set of procedures, a single set of definitions, brings a lot more consistency and a lot more predictability to the development regulations. Yes, it will make the document thicker, bigger, but hopefully everything will be in one place. So that'll be helpful. This slide shows 6 goals that we've identified for the project. These are based on conversations with staff, conversations with the city council, conversations with you, conversations with stakeholders, etc. User-friendly UDO and making it easier to use. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Increasing prosperity is a goal that we're all focused on. Making sure that economic development opportunities, jobs, investment are encouraged to come to Reidsville. And so that we don't write regulations that discourage investment or development here. Implementing adopted policy guides. So like all cities in North Carolina, Reidsville has land use policy guidance, and there's policies on the books that have been adopted that sort of indicate where we'd like to go in the future, how we'd like to develop, how we'd like the community to look, in 10 or 20 years. So implementing that kind of stuff is really the bread and butter of development regulations and UDOs. Broadening housing options. We're all aware of the housing crisis and the challenges that everybody's facing. Getting housing, keeping housing, getting new housing, it's a daily challenge. And to the extent that we can make it easier for people to get good housing, is something that we could and should do. And so that's one of the goals in the project. Making it easier to develop downtown. You guys have a beautiful downtown. Great bones here. And how can we encourage new, innovative, vibrant stuff to come and take advantage of what's here. So we'll have some discussion about how we propose to address some of that. And I'll preface it all by saying, probably the best thing that we can do from a regulatory standpoint in downtown is attempt to get out of the way, is attempt to foster and facilitate more growth, more development. So talk more about that in a second. And then finally, just ensuring consistency with state law, federal law, court precedent. These things are always changing. We're always getting new information, and there's always changes to the rules. And so keeping up with that and bringing your regulations kind of into the modern age is an important part of the project. So those are our goals. Okay. There are 6 tasks in this project. We have completed the project initiation. I don't know if you guys recall, I was before you a couple of months ago. That was part of the project initiation. This is task 2, the code assessment, and we'll talk more about what's in the code assessment in a second. From here, we do an annotated outline, a blueprint, if you will, for the UDO. Then we move into drafting, adoption, and then ultimately delivery. If you look carefully at the slide, you'll see our schedule. We seek to finish in December of next year. So we've got about a year to go before we're done with this project. And we'll have a handful of meetings between now and then. Plenty of opportunity for anybody who wants to share information, get involved, and affect the process to be part of things. It's a very, very important part of what we do. As I mentioned, I'm Chad Meadows. CodeWright is the lead firm, but I'm not the only person who's working on this project. There are a couple other planning professionals who are working with me. I mentioned this the last time I was before you, just letting everybody know there's a couple other people, Angie Manning and Andrew Mossel. Each of those 2 folks have their own planning firms, and they're involved in various parts of this process, whether that's assisting me with drafting regulations, communications to the community, etc. So I'm not just a single person in this. There are other people who are assisting me, thankfully. And obviously, we've got constant communication with your staff, and not just staff in planning, but other city departments. If you have not yet had the opportunity, please do check the project website, Reidsville.com. All of the draft work products, more details on the background of why we're doing this. There's answers to frequently asked questions, how to participate, etc. So a lot of great information here. We keep this updated, and we'll keep it updated through the project so that everybody can kind of keep up with what's happening. This document, the code assessment, is on the web page and is available for people to download and review if they wish. So, and we'll continue to post presentations and work product as we move through the process. Okay. What is the code assessment? What's in it? So, essentially, this code analysis or code assessment it's a review and a deeper understanding of the gaps that exist between the adopted policy guidance that you guys have on the books and what your regulations say. In other words, your land use policy guidance says who you want to be, okay? Your development regulations give you what you are from a land development standpoint. And there's often, and Reidsville is very typical, there's a gap between what you want to be and what you're getting. Okay, so this code assessment explores that gap and tries to figure out what are the areas and what are the pieces where stuff is missing so that we can supplement the development regulations and bring them into closer alignment with the land use policy guidance that we've got. Okay, so that's really what the code assessment is all about. It gives us a framework to talk about how should we improve our development regulations to bring them into closer alignment with our policy goals. There's a variety of suggestions about how to do that and a series of recommendations for how we improve the development regulations. So that's really what this thing is. It's kind of the first deep dive into the situation on the ground today. What policy goals do we have? What do our regulations say? And what do we need to change to bring those two into alignment? Okay? The core of the code assessment document are 7 key themes for improvement. This code assessment basically includes a very exhaustive review of your policy guidance. It includes an exhaustive review of your current development regulations. It includes details from the stakeholder interviews that were conducted in the first part of the process. And then finally, it includes these 7 key themes for improvement, each with anywhere from 7 to 12 different recommendations about changes to make. Okay? And we're going to talk in probably more detail than you'd like about those recommendations, but I think it's really important to give you guys a good flavor of where our heads are and the recommendations that we would make to you going forward, and getting your feedback on whether or not you feel like, yeah, you got it, or something's missing, or maybe you've made a suggestion that isn't maybe as important as you think it is. So, okay. Let's talk about these recommendations. So the first one of those is implementing the adopted policy guidance. There's a photograph of your land development plan up on the screen that was adopted last year. So, this has been a document that's in play. There is another piece of policy guidance, your greenways and blueways document. It's a little bit older, but still relevant. Those words on the screen are the goal statements directly from your policy guidance. So, fostering a thriving downtown, creating a stronger local economy, more jobs, more places to shop, more economic opportunity, expanded housing, infrastructure, making sure that we've got roads, water, sewer, drainage, all of the things that are important to make development functional for the folks who live here. Better facilities for parks, trails, walking, exercise, active living, bike lanes, that sort of thing. Getting people the ability to get outside and move around without having to be in a car. Preserving our sense of history, our sense of community. So protecting community character and making sure that the new development that comes in, whether that's downtown or elsewhere, is consistent with the best parts of the community character that exists today. Okay? So those aren't my words, they're your words. Those are the things that are inside the plans that the city's already adopted. And the rest of the slides on the key themes will focus on how we achieve these things, or suggestions we would make for how that would be accomplished. So, creating an easy-to-use document, the second sort of key theme for improvement. I mentioned already this idea of a unified development ordinance, that we want to bring together all these disparate documents into a single volume. A new, more intuitive document structure. I know you guys have spent a lot of time reviewing your zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and it can be a bit of a challenge. If you're a layperson and not familiar with how these things work, it's kind of hard to find your way around. We would suggest a slightly simpler structure, 10 chapters, organized in alphabetical sequence, that are a little bit more intuitive. We put the like material together, so all the procedures are in one place, all the definitions are in one place, all the standards are in one place, in one of the 10 chapters. So we found that kind of intuitive document structure makes it easier for people to find what they're looking for. Another important point I won't harp on, but I'll mention to you is, all of this is geared toward the creation of a more robust digital document that you'll be able to use on your computer and move around quickly and easily, which is something you really don't have today. So that'll be a huge step forward for you guys. This alphabetical sequence and some of the other things that we're going to do, we're going to make this document a lot easier to just pick up and find what you're looking for. Along those lines, navigational aids, things like chapter-based tables of contents, very detailed page headers that tell you exactly, each page in the document tells you exactly where you are, what chapter, what section, what subsection. So you can move through the document just by looking at the tops of the pages. The bottoms all have page numbers, they have the last effective dates, etc. We incorporate these cross-references that allow you to know where to go in the document to find related information, and in the digital versions, you'll just be able to click on it and you'll be taken right there. We include a table of abbreviations, we included an index, so there's a lot of things that will be included in this UDO that make it a lot easier to get around and find what you're looking for. So, a new page layout, something that's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more fun to look at, a little bit more beautiful. With more white space for your eyes to rest, and a clearer differentiation about how text relates to the text above or below it. Your current regulations use a lot of long paragraphs, and I'm sure that you've had the experience of trying to unwind 10, 12 thoughts that are located within a single paragraph, and how difficult that can be Best practice tells us to not have prose and long paragraphs, but rather short numbered statements. So we try to break those long paragraphs up into individual numbered sentences or groups of short sentences. Less is more when it comes to trying to communicate complex ideas. So converting these paragraphs into numbered statements. More illustrations, and that goes without saying. You should expect to see over 300 new illustrations in this document, okay? You guys have some illustrations in your current code. They could use a little help. Some of them are a little dated, but we will be bringing unique, tailored illustrations to this code that use the same voice and the same terminology and the same color schemes, so it all kind of hangs together and feels like it's yours. And it's yours because it was made for you. Do you have a question about this? Okay. Summary tables. I'm a big believer in summary tables. The last development code that I worked on, it was adopted on, it's a month ago today. How about that? That document has 80 summary tables in it. There are summary tables for use standards. There are summary tables for landscaping, signage, parking, procedures. If you can think of it, we can make a table for it, and a table allows you to provide a great deal of information in a very small space, and organize that information in ways that make it very easy to digest. So you don't have to spend a lot of time searching through regulations to find what you're looking for. Okay? So big believers in summary tables. Okay, questions on this idea of a easier to use document?
The summary table is close to like a cliff note.
They're not necessarily cliff notes because they don't summarize or mask over any information. All of the detail is there. It's just organized in a way that makes it easier to find and easier to use. Great question.
And it's kind of clarifying the bullet point type thing.
Yes, absolutely. Good questions. Okay. Ensuring efficient and predictable review processes. This is something we've heard a lot about from the stakeholder community. It's certainly something that your staff is very interested in. Making sure that everybody understands what the procedures call for, how we process applications. We might not always agree on whether or not I have to go through this procedure, but by gosh, we'll agree on what the language is, what the procedure says, and the steps in the process. And so to do that, we rely on intent statements about this is why we have this procedure in the first place. We provide a lot more clarity about the things that are exempted from a procedure. Okay, so while you might have some things that are subject to a procedure, oftentimes there are elements of that same kind of development that might be exempted from it. So let me give you an example of that. Almost every development in the city requires a building permit, right? Everybody needs to go pull a building permit, right? No. Fences don't need building permits. Accessory structures smaller than 144 square feet don't need permits. So there's a couple examples where there's development that you would normally think there are permit requirements, but those kinds of specific developments are exempted. So being clear with applicants about that is very important. I just picked on building permits. There'll be over 30 procedures set down in your UDO for code users. And it's important to list those kinds of, who's subject to this and who isn't. Uniform procedural language. Each one of those procedures will be organized in the same fashion. We'll have a purpose and intent statement. We'll talk about applicability, exemptions, how the process works, who makes the decision criteria they rely on to make the decision, if the approval expires, and if so, in what time frame, what is the effect of the approval, and how might you appeal an outcome that you don't like. That's all supplemented with a procedural flowchart that gives somebody a visual depiction of the steps in the process with cross-references to relevant information that they might need to look at as they're going through. Okay, so just soup to nuts, more helpful, kind of easier to understand, right? When you're traveling away from home and you don't know where you are or what you're doing, you want to go somewhere where you feel comfortable, where you know what to expect, right? And when your development regulations, your development procedures are organized the same way, then people learn to grow to, they understand what to expect. And that's helpful. And it makes sometimes what can be a little bit of a daunting process a little bit easier. So, some comprehensive conflict guidance, okay? So when you've got a thick document that has a bunch of different development regulations, it's inevitable that there's going to be conflicting provisions. That's just the way that it is in living in 2023. And this comprehensive guidance on conflict helps people understand, well, if one part of the code says this and one part of the code says that and they conflict, which one am I supposed to follow? How does that work? Which one controls? A lot of local government regulations simply say, well, the most restrictive rule controls. Well, that's not always the case, right? Some people get variances. We're incorporating some incentives and flexibility provisions in here that are going to permit some kinds of development, in some cases, to comply, but not fully comply. And I'll talk more about that, especially in the downtown area. So it's important to help people understand, what do I do when one part of the code says zig and the other says zag? How do I navigate that? Obviously, staff's always going to be around for help, but it's nice to have something written down. Some missing procedures. Okay, I told you there were going to be about 30 procedures in this UDO. And the reason for that is not because I like really long documents. It's because there are some procedures that, frankly, just aren't included in your current regulations that modern development codes include. Things like, how do we do annexations, administrative adjustments, a variety of different kinds of subdivisions that we're required to include regulations for, performance guarantees, fees in lieu, no impact to riparian buffers. These aren't things that we're just coming up with for fun. These are things that you guys need to have in your development regulations, and for whatever reason, you lack them today. So we need to supplement what you've got with what the state and federal law requires us to include. Okay. Questions on ensuring efficient and predictable review processes? This is a very important part of this document, and it's one that we're very keen on. And so this will be a quantum leap forward for you guys from what you've got today. Okay. Pre-application conferences. You do them today, but it would be nice to have a little bit more guidance about who has to do a pre-application conference, when, and what should they expect from that experience, okay? Pre-application conferences are helpful because they help an applicant understand what they're supposed to do. They give the staff some insight on the applications that are going to be coming in, okay? Staff can share with a potential applicant, hey, if you're going to bring an application for a manufactured home in this location, you've got to get a special use permit. That's very helpful information to know before you make an investment. So these pre-application conferences are very helpful in that regard. I mentioned earlier that every procedure has some kind of expiration, and that's mostly true. They almost all have an expiration provision. Being upfront and clear with a code user about what those rules are and how you're vested if the rules should change after your approval, very important information to know. I'll talk about measurable decision-making criteria because that's super, super important. And the reason it's important is to keep you out of litigation. Litigation is a very dangerous place to be for local governments these days in North Carolina for a variety of reasons. Generally speaking, North Carolina is a pro-property rights state. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you are a regulator of property rights in a pro-property rights state, there is a greater likelihood that you will find yourself in litigation. So you have to be extra careful about the decisions that you make and the criteria that you use to base those decisions on. Okay, so one of the things that we do is try to incorporate measurable review criteria for every decision-making process. Purposes of clarity, purposes of legal sufficiency. Okay. Finally, this scope of work includes an outside or a compendium, a procedures manual, a user's guide that you could give to applicants that has information. Here are the application procedures, the submittal requirements, the schedule, the fees, supplemental information like plant lists, resources on staff members to contact with questions, answers to frequently asked questions that other applicants who came before you posed. That kind of information is super helpful. And it's in a document outside of the UDO so that staff can change it easily and so that all of that extra paper width doesn't find its way into your UDO. Okay? Questions? Feeling good? Please.
If there was, under this, if there was someone here with, I don't know, it seems like this, if this is what you're talking about, I guess, the predictable review processes, it would seem like, under this one, sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. Section 15 through 31, the duties as to subdivisions indicates the planning board shall review all subdivision plats, and it says delete. So,
Under these, I can clarify that. So that was done. The planning board hasn't reviewed plats since the early 90s. Council changed that. So the planning board hasn't reviewed plats in a very long time. So that's why it's deleting text that's inconsistent with what council changed in the past.
so if there was I don't know, it just seems like this would put a lot of the decision making back in staff's hand rather than council and planning board.
So that's good for development because when you have special use permits, when you have to do a rezoning, when you have to do this and that, it inhibits, it can kind of be a deterrent to developers because they're, oh, I need to invest this kid's fee, go for planning board, and then go for council. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this or not. And so it can kind of turn people away and like, is that something they really want if I'm going to have to go through all this? So that's why it's making it like clear standards and like with, for example, with special use permits. So special use permits, it's a permit, but you have to go to planning board and council to get it, but there's still the standards. So like you get rid of the special use permit to keep the standards, staff has to adhere to those standards to make sure that the building complies with it, but staff issues the permit for it. So it's the same thing, it's just who issues the permit for it. You're keeping the same standards for it. It's just kind of making it more streamlined so that we can be more clear with people and that we can encourage development and say this is what the standard is, you have to adhere to this, and then you get your permit, it's a lot all right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But I kind of agree with him. It takes away some of the citizen input on the thing and puts it all in the staff. And, you know, we live here with these people too.
That's really in the book, it's in the standards that you put in the ordinance.
Would this also apply to regular person coming in? I don't know, is there a situation where a community member that, you know, perhaps we all know would come in and or have to go through a strenuous process? I'm concerned that it would streamline the process for corporate developers and not.
No, this would be for anybody. Anybody, the standard is the standard regardless of who it is.
Okay.
I mean, it's what they want to do that trips the standards for that development. So that's anybody.
Okay.
Anybody that's from who wants to put a shed in their backyard to an industrial developer that wants to build a giant facility. Like, there's going to be a standard for what they're doing. That's what the standard defines and regulates.
So how do we continue with this with maintaining some sense of community?
Well, I mean, you're not being, I mean, there's still gonna be rezonings, I mean, you're still gonna have zoning on property, if someone wants to do something else that's not allowed in that district, then they have a petition to change it. There's still gonna be conditional zoning if they want to maybe increase density, if they wanna go beyond what the standard is, they're maybe try to go more into that. Then they have to go before council to ask for approval to do that, to go beyond the standard.
And the planning board. I mean,
Yeah.
I absolutely understand your concern, which is, wait a minute, what's happening to the role of the planning board through the development review process? And the answer to the question is, not a lot. You guys are the keepers of the responsibility for long-range planning and study and analysis and suggestion and recommendation to the elected officials about how Reidsville should develop and grow. Okay, so that doesn't change at all. You still maintain a role in rezonings, text amendments, conditional rezonings, and several other procedures. Now, as far as subdivisions go, you have some standards in the books that are 30 years old that are wrong. You guys haven't been involved in subdivision review in decades. It's just that nobody ever bothered to change the book. So that the section that you pointed out is one of those changes where we're trying to bring the language into alignment with practice. As far as the concern about community character, those are important considerations, and you're absolutely right to be concerned about that. The changes that we're suggesting be made requires us to have discussions back and forth and identify for applicants, this is what we want to see. These kinds of developments are the developments that we think are consistent with community character and with what we're looking for. And if you come forward and you comply with those rules, then we want to make it easy for you to develop that. If you want to come forward and propose something that doesn't comply with those rules, guess what? You're probably not going to be approved. We do incorporate a process, a conditional zoning process that allows somebody who wants to do something different. Because let's face it, you need to have flexibility. You need to give people a chance to innovate. The conditional rezoning process creates a forum for an applicant to come before you and plead their case about how they want to do something different and why, and most importantly, how that development is going to be better than what would have resulted from a strict application of the standards as they're drafted. And you and City Council will be the deciders about whether or not you agree that, yeah, this is better, or no, it's not better. This is junk. We're not going to approve this. So you have that authority today. You'll have that authority under the UDO. And what you won't have, or what you'll have now that you don't, what you will not, what you will get but do not have now is more clarity about what are you looking for. What are the requirements that we want to see? What's the character that we're trying to establish? The UDO will give you more detail on that. More detail in terms of design, more detail in terms of how parking is located and configured, more detail about landscaping, signage, lighting, fences, walls, and so forth. So we're trying to codify the rules and be clear with people. This is what we want. If you bring us what we want, your review process will be easy. If you bring us something that's not consistent with what we want, then your review process will not be so easy. It's not impossible, but we will have a separate process to go through where there will be discussion, negotiation, scrutiny, and a requirement for you to prove why what you're proposing is better. Does that make sense? It's a good question, and I appreciate your concerns. I always tell folks, it's very common for planning boards to be caught up in implementation and spend their meetings doing implementation instead of doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is planning. You're the planning board. You're supposed to be thinking about, are we achieving our goals? What else do we need to be studying and doing? Are we having success? And that is an important part of what the planning board is supposed to do. That's what the statutes say planning boards are charged with. And you can't do that if you're running around hearing special use permits or reviewing subdivisions. That's something that you pay them to do. You guys are supposed to be the ones who are being the visionary people and helping guide us as we go forward. That's the way that it's supposed to operate. Unfortunately, if the regulations aren't structured that way, you find yourself dealing with things that frankly are just the basic application of standards, like what you just did, that manufactured home application. You look at the 4 standards, yep, you're good to go. I mean, that person had to pay hundreds of dollars and wait weeks to come before you for you to say, yep, that sounds good. Staff could have made those same interpretations based on those same standards for less money faster, right?
But that takes the citizens of the town who communicate with us kind of out of the process.
No, they have an opportunity to communicate with you, they have an opportunity to communicate with the staff, and they have an opportunity to communicate with the applicant.
So what you saying is a done deal version.
Let's say the standards, so if it's not something that council likes, then, or that can also be changed. I mean, if you don't like the standard, it's not something that everyone wants. So the standard, so regardless if they go before you and council, it's still the standard. So, I mean, really.
But it can be massaged. I mean.
No, the standard is the standard.
Some applications, some things can be, okay? Under the legislative process, the rezoning process, there is room for negotiation and movement. Under the quasi-judicial process, there is no room for movement. Under the ministerial process, those things that staff decides, there's no room for movement. You either meet the standard or you don't. Same with the special use permits. You either meet the standard or you don't. There are conditions of approval that you can apply in situations where this use generally meets the standards, but I have a concern about this feature or that feature. But you can't deny the special use permit if it meets the standards, regardless of what the community says. The legislative process does give you that opportunity for the public to speak up and comment and affect change. And that can still take place at the planning board level with these legislative applications. It's never been anything that could take place in a quasi-judicial setting, and it's never been anything that could take place in a ministerial setting. And unfortunately, the way your code is drafted, it just doesn't make that clear. You know what I mean?
And it's just like Dylan read in the statement prior to, under the general statutes, special use permit is not a popularity contest. It's not a political hearing on whether the community wants it or not. It's whether the proposed plan meets the standards of the ordinance. So it's not.
I'm sorry. Was the special use permit tonight, is that an example of something that we probably would have seen, like you said?
Yes, and let me try to explain why. Special use permits are quasi-judicial matters, okay? And that means that when the Board of Adjustment sits, or town council sits and hears a quasi-judicial matter, they actually sit as a panel of judges, okay? And when you're in a court proceeding with a panel of judges, you rely on evidence and testimony that is delivered during the proceeding, okay? North Carolina law is very clear that the review authority who decides a special use permit may only rely on the evidence and testimony that is given during the hearing where the decision is made, okay? In the past, somebody along the way has interpreted the statutes to say that it's okay for the planning board to consider an application and make a recommendation. And that's fine, that's true. But a strict reading of the law says town council cannot look at your recommendation. They can't rely on it to make their decision because that's evidence and testimony that was provided outside of the hearing where the decision is made. And that's the law. And so that's an example of how special use permits would change. Those would be things that would go directly to council, like they always should have, without the injection of evidence and testimony that takes place outside of the hearing. If that is a big concern, One thing that some communities do is they hold a joint hearing. The planning board and the town council have a hearing together, and they hear the case at the same time. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do that. I think that's kind of a crazy solution, but that is something that some people do. And that's done because this issue of evidence and testimony taking place as part of the evidentiary hearing process. So, I don't know if that helps clarify anything for you, or just confuses you.
Say, like in a special use permit, there's really no community say it doesn't meet the standards or it's not. So to your point, Joe, legally, under the statute, there is no community input legally under the law. So taking away a special use permit does not legally remove community input that was never supposed to be there.
Okay.
I think we did prove that based on the characteristics of the surrounding area, which is one of the profiles of that. Had it not looked like the community, the area around it, I don't think I would have been inclined to vote for it. What would staff's interpretation of that have been?
That's a very vague regulation on whether it meets, that wouldn't be something that I think that we would, does it meet the character of the surrounding area?
Does staff make a recommendation on special use permit? Okay, so they don't have a recommendation.
Right, but if staff would have taken over that.
Staff's never going to take that over. That's going to go to council. The only thing that we're changing with the special use permit process is we're removing a review by a body that should not have been taking place, not because you guys can't do it or that it's not helpful, it's because the law doesn't permit it.
So with manufactured homes, so for example, if you got rid of the special use permit, there would be no, is it in conformance with the surrounding area? It would just be, does it meet the construction, the design standards for it? And is it allowed in that district that it's in? Does that make sense? So if it's allowed in the district, just like anything else, does it meet the standards for it? So there wouldn't be any, does it meet the character of the surrounding area? Because that's not something the staff can interpret. That's not a, it's, is it allowed? Does the table of communities allow it there? And does it meet the standard, the design standard?
Will other planning boards be getting rid of?
Yes, absolutely. Most definitely, unless the planning board is the body that's deciding quasi-judicial application, which in some communities happens, okay? So in some communities, a planning board is designated by town council as the body that makes decisions on special use permits. So that's an option.
The county does that.
I'm not sure.
If you can think of it, there's somebody out there who does it that way. And I mean, you know, we can share your information with the elected officials and they may decide that they, you know, want to redelegate who decides special use permits. I mean, that's, you know, that's certainly, you know, it's in their purview to do that. It's not uncommon as long as you're designated the body to do that. That's certainly legitimate. If that were the case, then we wouldn't have TRC conducting a hearing and making a recommendation on a special use permit. It would just go straight to you because you are the ones who decided, right? One other issue that, you know, I'm sorry I didn't pick up on is this issue about, you know, what the case you have before us tonight being a manufactured home and requiring a special use permit. So we haven't yet reviewed the use table and made suggestions about whether or not manufactured homes in those districts should or should not get a special use permit. I don't know that we're that far in the process yet. We're still trying to explore what are the, you know, the fundamental procedural and other issues in your code. We will take up this issue about, you know, what uses are appropriate in what districts and what should the process be. And you'll have plenty of opportunity to you know, look that over and say, yeah, I agree, or no, that doesn't make sense, or why did you do it that way? And that's a discussion that we'll have the next time I come to see you with the annotated outline. But I'm sorry that it didn't occur to me that that might be part of your question is, wait a minute, you know, will manufactured housing still have to get a special use permit? I don't know the answer to that question. If I were to guess, I'd say probably no. I'd say we probably remove that requirement. Okay? But I've heard you loud and clear about, you know, what's the role of the planning board? How do we maintain the spirit of the planning board's service and ability to make sure that the community has a chance to weigh in. I get that and understand what you're saying, and that your input to us is that needs to be safeguarded.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Incentives and greater flexibility. At the head of the conversation, I said we really want to encourage growth in downtown and have, we want to increase economic prosperity for folks who live here. One of the best ways to do that is to use incentives and flexibility in smart ways, okay? To try to tell people, this is the kind of development that we'd like to have. And if you do this development, you'll have an easier review process. That's a great example of an incentive. We're incentivizing the kind of development that we've thought carefully about and made that the path of least resistance. So that's a great example of incentives. There are other things that we can incorporate into our review process that creates some flexibility as well. So some of the things that are on the slide in front of you now, sustainability, development, incentives. If you save the world, if you do things that are good environmentally, you should get a reward for that. Maybe it's extra density, maybe it's a slightly taller building, maybe it's a bigger sign or some kind of relief from a parking standard or something like that. If you are helping make Reidsville more economically and environmentally proper. Okay? The administrative adjustment is a way, it's a safety valve. Let's say for the sake of argument that somebody has a plan that comes through and they start working and somebody puts the foundation 6 inches in the wrong place and it doesn't meet the setback anymore. Okay? The administrative adjustment is a way that we can address that safety valve without running that person through a $400 variance application, 3 months delay while we wait to get in front of the board of adjustment and go through that process to potentially be denied and have to tear the house down. Okay? So we're trying to find ways that are practical for small deviations in some numeric standards. Not density, not uses, not several of our standards, but some dimensional provisions. We want to have a little bit of flexibility to save trees or deal with slopes or other kinds of unanticipated consequences that come from developing in the world. Conditional rezoning is a process where people have options to voluntarily condition their proposal. And applicants do that so that they can get an approval. They perceive that their neighbors aren't going to like what they're doing. So they voluntarily restrict themselves in pursuit of your approval. Okay? The conditional rezoning process lays down the rules for how that will work. And we're suggesting 3 tiers of that. So there's a very simple, I just want to do this one use. Okay, that's all I'm doing. Every other use that would otherwise be allowable in this zoning district, I'm not going to do, and I'll sign a piece of paper that says that. Or, I know the setbacks in this district are 30, I'll give you 50. And I know the landscaping requirements say I need 40 trees, I'll give you 60. And I'll sign that I'll do that. That's another example of a tiered conditional zoning. The third example, the third of the 3 tiers, is the more negotiated approach. I've got a master plan, I've got a concept plan, I want to deviate from what the zoning districts require, and here's why I want to deviate from it, and here's what it's going to look like, and here's how it's going to function better than what your rules are going to result in. And I get to plead my case to you and the council. Okay, that's the third tier. So, a robust approach to this kind of conditional rezoning process. Conservation subdivisions are something that we're suggesting be incorporated. That's where you bring development homes closer together on smaller lots and in pursuit of larger areas of undisturbed open space that are left alone, whether for environmental reasons or for recreation reasons. We leave these places alone and concentrate or focus development in a tighter area, subject to specific rules about I can't see it from the roads, I can't see it from existing neighborhoods, etc. It's safe, those kinds of things. Conservation subdivision gives us a little bit of option. Alternative minimum compliance, a lot of the development standards create opportunities for applicants to request minor deviations in how the development standards are applied. For example, let's say for the sake of argument that I've got an overflow parking lot that I use once every 6 months. Do I have to pave those 200 spaces, or can I use gravel with wheel stops? An alternative minimum compliance provision in the parking standards allows an applicant to make a request like that. I don't know if anybody would actually make that request, but they could make a request, and there's rules for how that can be considered. Okay? It's not a gimme. You don't just get it because you ask for it. There's rules about how it works. And alternative minimum compliance is included in landscaping, parking, fencing, signage, and lighting. Okay. Density bonuses. A few years ago, the General Assembly decided that local governments could no longer control single-family design quality. Okay, that was taken away from all local governments in the state. And so you can do this voluntarily if the applicant voluntarily agrees to follow some design guidelines for single-family homes that you have. Then they may feel free to do that, but there's very little incentive for them to do so because it's more expensive, okay? In recognition of that, we're suggesting inclusion of very minor density bonuses that would offset some of those costs of having nicer homes. These are for subdivisions, okay? These are not one person coming in and doing a house. This is, I'm coming in and doing 500 houses. And, you know, we could offer a minor density bonus, a unit an acre, say, for them to voluntarily agree to follow our design standards so that all of the houses in the neighborhood look better, right? The last one on the list is menu-based design standards. We're incorporating non-residential, mixed-use, multifamily design standards. So development that comes to Reidsville after this UDO is adopted, if those things are included, would have to comply with those standards. What we attempt to do is give applicants a choice. Here's how your building needs to look. There's 7 choices, pick 3 of them. We don't care which 3 as long as you pick 3. Can I pick 2? No, you have to pick 3. Which 3 do I have to pick? Whichever ones you want. Can I have 4? Sure, you can include 4 if you want to, but all you have to have is 3. So it's a menu-based approach to the standard. And we apply that to things like building massing, roof form, entryways, how the buildings are configured on the exterior, etc. So we try to incorporate some choice into, you know, the application process. As long as we get the minimum number of features, we're happy. The applicant got to choose and make the building the way that they wanted to. Okay? Does that make sense? Questions on incentives, flexibility? This is important stuff, and you know, modern development regulations include a lot of this. Okay?
Are those staff decisions, or does that come before?
It's a little bit of both.
Council?
Not everything is a staff decision. No, it's a little bit of both. Conditional rezonings obviously follow the conditional process. Conservation subdivisions is something that we can talk about. That might be something that you decide, well, I'd really like planning board to be able to decide that. Okay.
He has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, please.
For the construction of the homes themselves, I know that you're trying to get like as many in one area as possible, that way you have like more land to work with. Is there a limit to how close the houses can be, like side by side?
It's a great question. And the answer is yes. There is an absolute limit, which is the North Carolina Fire Code. Specifies the spacing and or the techniques that you use to position houses relative to one another. So in general, and this is in general, you know, I don't know about specifics here in Reidsville, but in general, that measurement is 3 feet. Now, maybe that's too close, and if it is, then we talk about something that's more than that, which we can do. Less than 3 feet, and you've got to comply with fire code rules. And that means fire walls and limitations on things, you know, penetrations in the wall, etc. So it gets technical pretty quickly, but That's the answer to that. And I wouldn't want to give you the impression that we want more houses everywhere. It's just that the conservation subdivision is an option that allows people to cluster houses in pursuit of retention of open space. You don't get an unlimited number of houses. There's still a density number for that zoning district. If it's 8 units an acre and you have 10 acres, you get 80 units. The conservation subdivision just lets you put them closer together. You don't get 100, you get 80. Okay? Great question. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I was just concerned, like if in the subdivisions, if there was a fire on one building, the closer they are, is there a possibility of the fire spreading to another building, and also would the density of the amount of buildings give the fire department issues?
Right, that's a great question. Absolutely, positively, every subdivision that goes through the process needs to be reviewed by y'all's fire professionals.
Yeah, our fire marshals, we have a technical review committee that reviews all subdivisions and site plans, and they give comments on the new development.
Yeah. So those fire concerns are, it's the law that we make sure that the fire marshal has seen the proposal and is comfortable with what's being proposed. Good stuff, thank you.
About the parking spaces, what differences are you suggesting for, say, a town hall or apartment complex? What does that look like?
So the question you're asking is, let's say I want to do a townhouse development or apartment development, and so there's parking rules that come with that, and what might the alternative minimum compliance, some examples of alternative minimum compliance requests for that kind of development? Is that the question?
I guess. I mean, it seems like when I'm reading through this, they're going to be changed. Or is that not true?
Well, no. I think we're going to review the parking standards to see if they are excessive. Okay.
Gotcha.
So two spaces per unit is the standard that I've seen for most apartments. But, I mean, we'll look at see what the requirements are now. We're not that far into the process yet to look specifically at that number.
Some changes we might see. Some development ordinances structure the parking requirements based on the size of the unit. So if you've got one bedroom, maybe you need 1.25 spaces per unit instead of 2. Or if you've got 4 bedrooms, maybe 2 is not enough. Another issue that is sort of coming to people's attention is the need for guest parking, right? And incorporating guest parking requirements, bicycle parking requirements, in some cases, motorcycle spaces. So those are all things that we'll explore as we go through this process.
Is there a part about downtown parking, or is that not good?
Well, we're still talking about what that might consist of. A lot of places basically remove parking standards from downtown. Now, maybe that's appropriate in Reidsville, maybe it's not. I'm not quite sure that we've gotten to that stage in the discussion, but I think something like that is on the table, looking at the parking requirements and asking ourselves, does this make sense for downtown?
As far as preventing, I remember a while back, I don't remember what document it was in, but in areas in Reidsville where we were looking at growth, and like where we want growth to happen, and where we're expecting growth. What does it look like to prevent displacement of lower income folks or gentrification type of things? We have.
How are we addressing that? How are we attempting to do that? That's a great question. And that's a real challenge. And it's something that's happening in a lot of North Carolina communities now. I think one way we combat that is by creating a wider range of housing choices overall, which is absolutely positively one of the things that we're doing. So it may well be that some of the redevelopment or promotional efforts that one part of the development ordinance seeks to create is counteracted or mitigated by other parts of the ordinance that say we want more houses in more choices, smaller homes, larger homes, multi-generational homes, accessory dwelling units, etc. More different iterations of housing for a wider range of buyers, a wider range of preferences. So it's hoped that that counteracts, displacement. And I think this is a policy question for the elected officials to weigh in on: is displacement a factor that is significant enough that we need to consciously address that through regulations? Are there tools to do that? Absolutely. There are requirements for provision of deed restricted housing. There are aspects that we can incorporate that mandate a certain percentage of new developments incorporate these kinds of units. I mean, that's stuff that can be done, that is being done in other places, but we need to have some policy guidance in hand to incorporate that. So I think that's a question that we would pose to the elected officials. If that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these kind of questions I'm asking, is it safe to bring them up again?
Yeah.
When we
Absolutely. Please do.
Well, this document is more framework.
Yeah, right.
Like it's more general. We haven't gotten into a lot of specific policy requirements.
Absolutely appropriate. Questions are always appropriate, always good. And while the answers might not always be good, we always try to get better answers if we can't answer a question. I'm never ever afraid of discussion or debate or suggestion, because it makes for a better ordinance, which is what the end goal is. For me, from the guy standing behind the podium, my goal is to make sure that the ordinance is the best ordinance it can be. Couple more slides to cover, then we'll wrap it up. Revitalizing downtown was one of the key themes for improvement. Certainly, a lot of guidance in the comprehensive plan and other policy documents about this. There's a handful of suggestions here, like going from a single downtown district to a pair of districts, one for the sort of core of downtown and one for the periphery. The core focuses on intense uses and a lot of density, and the periphery focuses on the transition from the core to the neighborhoods around it, and making those transitions smoother and easier, right? More protective of the lower density housing around downtown. Relaxing some standards downtown. You heard me say earlier, one of the best things we can do for successful downtowns is just get out of the way, right? Promoting mixed use, making mixed use the path of least resistance in downtown, and creating some incentives so that somebody says, gosh, why wouldn't I do mixed use? That makes sense. I'll have greater development potential if I do mixed use. Being flexible in how we address non-conforming development. Downtown was built before these rules were put in place. Downtown was built before the current rules were put in place, and they don't always fit. And so how do we stay out of our own way when it comes to lot size and setbacks and other kinds of provisions that make non-conforming development difficult to address? How can we pull those stops out? The infill development standards are intended to protect and promote compatibility with those things that are not in downtown. Okay, so if we're going to be, boosting for downtown and calling for more development and more activity, we can't leave behind the neighborhoods that surround downtown and just leave them hanging in terms of, here's this new, less compatible development that you guys get to cope with now. So we address that through the infill compatibility provisions. Waiving some infrastructure requirements, like minimum street widths or requirements to upsize pipes, etc. We started conversations with Public Works about what that might look like, and that's underway. But that's definitely a suggestion in pursuit of encouraging development downtown. And then finally, adaptive reuse, where somebody's coming into a building with a use, and we consider that use to be adaptive reuse instead of, oh, that's commercial or manufacturing or residential or mixed use. It's adaptive reuse, and we want to facilitate adaptive reuse. Subject to standards. We don't want to create negative externalities for neighbors, At the same time, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to come in and use those existing vacant buildings. Okay? Modernizing the districts and uses. We want to provide sufficient detailed information on all of your zoning districts, purpose, intent, precedent imagery on this is the kind of development that's appropriate in this district, this is the kind of development that's not appropriate in this district. The establishment of a new mixed-use by right district where I can come in and put mixed uses in by right. Don't have to get a rezoning to have mixed use in that district. A new governmental district for your parks, your schools, etc. A new planned development district, an opportunity for supercharging the negotiated process that comes from, you remember the tiers from the conditional rezoning? The planned development district supercharges that third tier, that negotiated process. You guys still get to review it. There's even higher standards for planned development districts, okay? But they do get to request deviations or reductions from development standards as part of establishing a district. So that is very much a negotiated process. Finally, some new overlays. Overlay districts right on top of your base zoning districts. That's things like flood, water supply watershed. Maybe we do a gateway corridor overlay district, your local historic overlays, etc. So incorporating some new overlays into your approach, right? You guys are patient, I appreciate that. 3-tiered use classification system. Use classifications, you've heard of them, probably never heard that word used that way, but you know the 5, we all do. Residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, agricultural. Those are the 5 use classifications. There's no more than those 5, that's it. A use classification system that recognizes those 5 classifications, establishes a series of use categories underneath them. Residential is split into group housing and individual housing, okay? And I'll let you guys figure out the use types under group housing versus individual. Modern use types are really important. Uses change all the time, okay? So we now have, in 2023, we have co-working places and business incubators and event centers and microbreweries and all kinds of things that 10 years ago we didn't have. There's no reason to think that in 2033 we're not going to have even more new uses. So bringing in modern use types and the means to address unlisted uses helps keep our code modern and helps us adapt to changes. Reorganizing the use standards and recognizing principal uses, accessory uses, temporary uses, and prohibited uses. Okay. And then finally, reducing our reliance on the special use permit process in general. And I'll try to keep this discussion as brief as I possibly can. Special use permits are very legally fraught. They have a very specific and detailed legal process that has to be followed. A lot of local governments across the state don't follow those rules very well, okay? And that creates legal exposure for those governments. And the special use permit is not that powerful a tool. Why not? Because it assumes that the use that's under consideration is allowable in the zoning district. It's made that assumption. If a special use is allowed in a particular zoning district, then it's presumptively valid. It can be there. The special use permit process is the process by which you figure out how it can be there, not if it can be there. It's presumed valid, okay? And you begin to see some of the weaknesses of the special use permit. It doesn't permit you the leeway that you might think that it gives you. That's not really there. If something's permitted as a special use permit, you can't really say no if it meets the standards. Your review of a special use permit is more about what conditions might we apply, because we don't think that, we're worried about this particular aspect, or this particular feature of a special use permit. Bottom line, special use permits are somewhat weak and they're very dangerous legally. There's no good reason to continue to use them when you have more modern, more effective tools like conditional zoning, like clear standards, like delegation of authority to staff. Those are helpful modern tools that local governments like yours are using and getting away from this legally fraught, nebulous, quasi-judicial special use permit process. And I don't have a client that I'm working with today in the state of North Carolina that wants more special use permits. Everybody wants fewer special use permits because they are so dangerous. Okay? Questions? Our last slide on, please.
For, I know that like there's a lot of buildings downtown already, and the ones that are being planned to be revitalized would add a whole lot more people coming downtown.
If you're lucky.
I know that last year there was reworkings of the layout of the parking. But if there are more businesses coming in, I know it would be good to the city, but would there be enough parking to do so?
So with the redesign on the parking, we actually didn't lose any spaces, so it's the same as it was. For our public works department did a recount after the streetscape was done, and we didn't lose any, so it's actually the same as it was. So as far as adding parking, maybe something we have to, if it pops off and we have tons of business, that maybe something we look at. I mean, it's something that would take, the elected officials to determine. So it's not a question.
It's a great, and I forgive the anecdote, but you ever go fishing? Yeah, been fishing. So sometimes you go fishing, you have this thing called a stringer where you put the fish that you have on a stringer, and that keeps them there from swimming away. So you've had a successful fishing day when you don't have any room left on your stringer, okay? The same is true for downtown parking spaces. If you guys get to the place where you really don't have enough parking downtown, yahoo, that means it's working. And that's a perfect opportunity for a body like this, a planning board, to plan, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to have city lots? Are we going to change the metering of parking spaces? Are we going to change the rules in some way that creates more parking? That's the kind of problem you guys should be focusing on, not whether or not somebody's manufactured home meets the 4 criteria in the state statute. Great question. Okay, broad range of housing options. I mentioned this before, just more housing generally everywhere. Some small house, small lot options. There's a picture of a pocket neighborhood up there, which is just 7 or 10 small houses on a 2 or 3 acre in-town lot, that was platted maybe in the 40s or the 50s and has one house on it. The house is up at the street, and you can't put a road back behind the house. There's not enough room. How do we unlock the potential of that extra 2 acres behind that house? Small house and small lot options create an opportunity for that value to be captured for that homeowner and give you an opportunity to have more housing generally. So these small house, small lot options are important. The accessory dwelling unit, the granny flat, we've all heard about those. Those are important. More multifamily by right in certain areas. Can't do multifamily by right in Reidsville today. Gotta be a special use permit.
In R20, so in R12 and R6, multifamily is allowed by right. Townhomes and apartments in R20 and RA20, special use permit, also RS12. Special use permit.
Explore that.
Ultra low density, 3.5 units an acre. So what we're seeing is the missing middle housing, and because the days of large lot, huge single family development are minimal now. I mean, you see it happen every now and then. You'll have a specialized builder who wants to build those, and we have a couple of those being built right now. But overall, what you're seeing is more so the inflation cost has gone so high that buying a single family home is extremely expensive. And you're going to pay for a townhome when you pay for a starter home years ago. Just a couple years ago. So you can get a townhome for the same price as like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-3 years ago. So you're seeing this increase in the cost of living and the missing middle housing that is well documented. It's all over the media. You can Google missing middle housing and there's a whole book written on it. So it's, the idea is that not going full high density, not going, full,
Big apartment buildings.
yeah, but, maybe some small, because when you look back in development, in the history of development, if you look back to the pre-1940s, 50s era, you see mixture of housing everywhere, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. A lot of them look like houses, so you wouldn't really know that they were a duplex or a triplex, because they were built to look kind of like a house, but there's actually multiple entrances, so you probably may in the middle, because they weren't built like they build a lot of duplexes these days. So the mixture of housing was the norm. But then in the 1950s, we started separating out single family exclusive zoning, and the push now is to kind of allow some small multifamily housing along with single family for the intent that, we want to make sure that people have access to housing. It's not just large single family homes. That's the intent behind that.
The post-war building boom didn't do us any favors in terms of the housing market, right? And so we're trying to, back to the future or forward to the past, however you want to look at it, we're trying to go back and address those problems that were created by vast swaths of single-use zoning, particularly housing, and return to the days where you could have a vibrant in-town neighborhood that had some single-family homes, maybe some single-family homes that were converted to duplexes, some single-family homes that were maybe converted to triplexes, and some small footprint, quadplex, 5-6 unit developments that fit within that context of a residential neighborhood that we all know. We've all seen that, right? In the cities, that were developed before 1950. That's commonplace. But the zoning rules that we've had in most local governments in North Carolina since the 50s don't allow that to happen. So we're trying to get back to some of that in pursuit of addressing the housing crisis that we've got.
So we're not talking high density, like ultra big apartment. We're talking small, blends in well with the surrounding area, small, lower density, but still access to housing.
Some people use the word gentle density instead of missing. I like gentle density. You had a question?
I do. I would love to see our city, I'm not sure if you do not, have because I know it's done in probably larger cities, have some type of program to assist like qualified first-time home buyers. With home, if it's like assist with down payment. I know Mecklenburg County, when I lived there years ago, there was a program that offered, say, $7,500 toward, but you had to qualify. Sure. But I would love to see that, just to allow folks to be able to purchase their first home, maybe one of these tiny homes or duplex, because you tend to see smaller homes. You don't see the big, ranch house like
bigger cities can definitely, they have the access to funding to do
right.
that. That's really something that's a little bit outside. I think that would be great. I think that's a great idea. That is a little bit outside of the scope of this, but yeah, it's a good idea and something to consider. And it's something that I know a lot larger cities like Reidsville, some of those bigger places have the access to funding to do a little bit more stuff than small cities like Reidsville, but definitely a great idea.
Right.
All the input you guys are giving us is going to be recorded, is being recorded, and will be made available so that people know what was said and the information that you share with us in your input. So that will find its way into, in front of other people's eyes.
To pricing, doesn't seem like any home is affordable. Is this some type of I heard something yesterday, something like these somewhat higher density housing will help the market and not be so, there won't be a housing crisis, where there will be options. It may not be affordable, but there will be options, and that will help make other properties more affordable.
Because desirability drives the market. So do someone want to live there drives the market value. It's not necessarily are they just single family homes.
Right.
So I would think that would. I mean, I'm not a real estate agent. But I mean, I would think that it is desirable and it's allowing more people to live there than would.
So is the idea to get them to build and entice them to build, and then if it turns out people can't afford them, they just lower the price?
That's the market.
I see we're pushing this, but I don't see, I'm not seeing how a regular person in a job can reasonably afford this. Is it a long-term thing that I'm just not seeing that?
It's a great question. It's really an economic question, right? And so, what lever the UDO can move, what dial this document can move, is a supply side dial, right? We can create conditions to foster more supply, okay? And in the hopes that through the provision of more supply, the cost goes down. Now, that depends on whether or not there's jobs here, whether or not this is a desirable place to live. Now, the UDO can tangentially affect that by making it easy for employers to come here and start businesses. And the UDO can affect that tangentially by having parks and greenways and other features that, includes things that people like to have in the places that they live, okay? But that's where the UDO stops. The UDO isn't the market. And, so we can help set the stage, we can telegraph the desire, and we can pull out the stops that might be obstructions. If you want to control prices, that's a different lever, that's a different tool. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea, I'm just saying that's not this project. That's a separate effort, that would be focused on the economics of housing in Reidsville and how do we address that. One thing's for sure, helping supply is only going to make things better. It's not going to make it worse. Even if there is more housing that is more expensive, there's still more housing. And so the pressure on prices from demand is relieved at least a little bit. Now, I'm not an economist, so you definitely want to have a housing economist talk to you about those aspects of it if that's something that you want to pursue. But from the UDO standpoint, we can address supply. We want to address supply. We want to create more supply. Will that move the price lever the way that we want to? Maybe. Will it move it enough? I don't know. That's a deeper exploration. But we know that that's something that we want to do, is at least get more supply on the ground and hope that it's a reasonable price. It's a great question. Okay. Other stuff, other questions? How are we doing on time? So we're coming up on 8. I'm not in any hurry. We can talk all night if you want to. You guys have had some great questions so far, and one of the things I'll mention is that I'll be reviewing the video and putting together a summary memorandum of everything that people have asked, and sort of capturing all of that input and suggestion. That'll go up on the webpage, and we'll move forward. It'll be a supplement to this code assessment document. This is what we heard from the community. So, that'll be there for people, and you can go back and look at it. Anything else?
I think you alluded to it. Going for the supply of houses is a good thing, but to get people to come here to fill them, you need some kind of amenities to help
Yes, you do.
draw people in.
Yes, you do.
How do you incentivize that?
It's really a chicken or the egg kind of thing. I mean, because you have to have rooftops, as we know, we need to have more people in order to turn traffic numbers to turn development. However, you also need that, like you said, draw to get people to move here. So it is really kind of a chicken or the egg kind of thing. the thing that you can look at is that, well, right now, if we have such a low vacancy rate, we have such a low inventory, there's no way that anybody can move here right now. So the best thing to do is to increase that number and give the opportunity for them to.
What's gonna make them come?
But you got the casino, right?
That's one, yes, yes, yes.
Toyota,
There's jobs, yes. Amenities, yes. Good schools, yes.
One other thing on Greensboro, what we're seeing is Greensboro is filling up at a very high, very fast rate. So you're seeing development being pushed, you're seeing Northeast Greensboro right now growing much quicker because the west side and the south portions are full. So you're seeing that coming up in the northeast side. Well, we're right on 29. So we're kind of right in a position where we can capture that development as it grows out of Greensboro, because you're going to see more people moving to Reidsville. Just hop on the future I-75, go straight to Greensboro, work in Greensboro, to Greensville, or Danville. So I mean, I think we're situated in kind of a location that will drive that demand for it. And we're already seeing that we already have such a low vacancy rate that we don't have inventory to offer people in housing. So,
This question about how do you get these people here, that's the question that you guys should be asking. That's the work that the planning board should be doing, is thinking about those kinds of questions. And I would love to tell you that the UDO is the silver bullet. It is not. We can get out of our own way and we can set the stage and telegraph the message. But there are other things that have to be done. Investment, strategies that you guys are pursuing under economic development, and there's all kinds of things that have absolutely nothing to do at all with development rules that are going to impact how desirable this community is. And I mean, that's the long and the short of it. Figuring out what those things are and then moving those levers in ways that make a difference. And, if I knew what they all were, I'd be in a Learjet right now. But, I think that there's more to it than just the UDO, but if you don't have the UDO, you certainly aren't going to have success.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is transportation there? I'm saying if we continue to grow, the need for public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have, the SCAT now, but just wonder what does that look like in Reidsville in 5?
In 5 or 10 years? That's probably a better question for staff to answer.
So, with the development regulations, it's not going to require any kind of transportation be provided. It's more, I think that would be more so a policy question, like the former with the, grants for down payments on housing. That's kind of a program that you would sponsor. I mean, you can, with the development regulations, you can require certain things, like you can require certain facilities to accommodate transportation, but you can't really require it in and of itself.
I'm just thinking about how would if we grow, people, people take Uber, take Lyft. Of course, it's hard to find that in regional,
Right.
and drivers are scarce, so everybody doesn't have transportation.
Yeah, we have a very high number of people, especially in the southern portion of the city, that don't have a vehicle. I've seen that since it's so definitely a need, a little bit outside the scope of what the UDO can provide, but again, another great policy question that's worth considering.
Paratransit is the way that a lot of communities move into, providing transit. A development template where you don't necessarily have to have a car to meet all of your daily needs. That's firmly within the wheelhouse of the UDO, and the policy guidance as well. So, good questions, good stuff. And I actually look forward to, we're going to be digging down and going into more detail as we go forward. We've got some additional meetings with city staff. We're exploring, economic development issues with county members, and we're talking about, how are we going to build this mousetrap with inspection staff, and we're working on that. The next step for us is this annotated outline, which is, think of it as the blueprint for the UDO. So we're going to take everything that is in in the code assessment document, plus the information that you've given us, where we can address it and roll this into this annotated outline document, which is a dress rehearsal for the UDO. It will be 150 pages long, doesn't have tons and tons of detail in it, but you'll know exactly precisely what this framework of the UDO is going to be, what the sections are in there, and there'll be some general information for each section about what it's going to address or how it's going to differ from what's in your current rules. And then we'll bring that back to you, we're hoping in February of next year. Okay? At that time, it would probably be wise for us to update City Council just on, this is what we've heard and this is where we're headed. Is everybody, still good with this? So, I mean, I think you guys have given us a lot of food for thought and some great suggestions. So, there's some other things that we can incorporate in what we're doing, and I appreciate the input. Any other questions?
Well, one last thing from me. The whole idea behind from working with Shad and trying to put this thing together, what the framework of what it eventually might have evolved into is, since I got here, it's been, I hear all the time, it's hard work in Reidsville. Hard to, work and try to, start businesses and that. We're trying to make things as predictable as we can. Clear standards, clarity, flow charts, easy to understand for the public, from anybody who wants to build an addition to their house, someone that wants to build a multi-billion-dollar facility, anything in between. So it's clarifying it, it's making it accessible and understandable for everybody. That's the whole intent here, is for our code to exemplify what council adopted in the planning plan to accommodate more housing, but still keep reasonable. So that's the whole intent behind the proposed ordinance. That's the idea, is to kind of make the standard clear, but to make development where you can not have to jump through 1,001 hoops to do something for everything, when it's not necessary. That's the whole intent here. So I just wanted to elaborate on it.
You hear that complaint?
And so she's permits are a big thing. They're deterrent. I can't tell you how many people have called in and I want to do this. Well, you have to have a special use permit to do it. And it's like, well, how long does that take? 2 to 3 months being when you submit the application. So then you have to go to, so they would know going in if they're going to get it or not. So it acts as a deterrent for development when it's something that you can control with development standards. You can get the development that you want, but still make it a bit more streamlined, make it easier to work with.
Yeah, more predictable.
Exactly.
If you're going to, invest $100,000, $200,000 in retail, you want to know that you're going to be able to do what you want to do. That's not unreasonable. Guys, I thank you. I really appreciate your input, and I look forward to our next visit. Thanks.
All right, director's report.
I don't have anything. Council last month, of course, they appointed the new members. There was no business considered. The rezoning that they tabled off South Park Drive in November is going to be further in January.
Any comments from the planning board? Nothing else? Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll start.